Welcome to the Inside Carolina podcast. I am Tommy Ashley, your host. I'm joined by Buck Sanders and Jason Staples. That means it is the day after. Sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt, sponsored by JohnnyT-Shirt.com, and also rate us, review us, and subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, however you get your podcast and however you consume your digital media. Give us a review, 5-star rating. Let us know what you think of the show. It helps us get up the list when people are searching for a great college sports podcast. And if they search Inside Carolina, it should be near the top because this is one of the best. One of the best because of this show. Buck Sanders, I'll start with you. I mentioned it off the air, but I'm going to quote Mack Brown when asked about this ball game. He basically said it was perfect for our purposes. Won 49-9, played a ton of guys. Buck, your overall thought?
Perfection is kind of a high bar to meet, but I think they checked all the boxes that they wanted to check. They got enough points in the first half that they didn't need to really play anybody in the second half. I thought it was interesting that he said that's the first time he's ever done that, which is a little surprising to me. But, they got players on the field they hadn't had on the field before. They got to evaluate some kids. They got to reward some kids that are just practice fodder, basically, and let them get on the field. And, for the, at Keenan last game of the year, probably some of those guys were even seniors, walk-ons and so forth. So for those purposes, I think it was, as good as it could be. Perfect may be a different question, but I think mission accomplished for the game against WCU. Now it's on to more important things.
Indeed, Jason. When they flipped the scheduled games and put this game in front of Miami, I thought that was very beneficial for North Carolina. Miami picking up Duke relatively late in the process, certainly beneficial for them as they destroyed Duke and looked very good doing it. But when you're watching a game like this, from your standpoint, did Carolina accomplish everything they needed to or everything they wanted to, especially in light of what's coming next week?
I would say on the first one, they accomplished everything they needed to. I don't think they accomplished everything they wanted to by a long sight. And that's mostly because the second half, the execution that you'd like to see from your second units, from some of your third guys, just wasn't there. They did not play well in the second half, and I can promise you that this is tape that is going to be revisited in the off season for a lot of these guys, and that there's going to be some evaluations given that this needs to improve, that needs to improve, or you need to figure out whether you really want to play this game, and so in that sense, from the coaching side, you say we got out of it what we needed. We got some guys who, a lot of guys in the second and third teams oftentimes are by this point in the year, they're kind of restless and frustrated that they haven't played more than they have, and then all of a sudden they get in there, and if things don't go as well as they should, then you can kind of point to it and be like, you want to know why you haven't been playing?
There it is.
It's right there on tape. Eye in the sky don't lie, guys. And so that's really useful. And I think they also got a sense of when the lights come on, some of the reactions and skill sets of some of their guys are going to be. I think this was a very useful game for Criswell. He had to learn a couple things about ball security right away, and about this is not high school. Mm-hmm. Yep, this may be a bad college team, but your placement can't be there, and it can't be at this time, and you got to understand how teams are going to play this, and then you got to in college. In high school, you can kind of overpower that guy, roll over, and extend that ball over the goal line, and there's probably nobody there because he hasn't gotten there yet. In college, against a bad college team, against an inferior college team, there's going to be somebody there to make contact. So you keep that ball tight unless you can see everything around you. So little things like that are learning experiences that are really valuable. But I think I do think that there's probably on the coaching staff some disappointment with how certain guys and certain units played in the second half, just because they were hoping that some of those guys would extend the level of execution a little bit further. So a little bit of good, a lot of good, and a little bit of bad that then can be turned into good with some good coaching in this game.
If I agree with that, get some live action on tape. Because like you said, I don't lie. And they'll certainly have the option to see that. But one thing, we joke around about my favorite player and all that. And I was glad to see Criswell get some play.
Wait, we're joking about that?
Oh, yeah, we're joking. It depends on how they do. No, always going to be the best player on the team to me is the backup quarterback. But Buck, I thought Criswell looked – I don't know if it's fair to the kid to say this, but I thought he looked kind of nervous and looked rattled a little bit, especially when you throw that interception there. You can't throw late there. But anyway, to Jason's point, the point kind of reminds me, everybody talks about how, Alabama could beat the Cleveland Browns, but the worst pro team.
Oh, that drives me crazy.
For the worst pro team is still pro team. And then the worst college team, or one of the worst college teams that are out there, Western Carolina, fits that bill. They still ain't high school, Buck. What'd you think of Criswell's performance?
Yeah, I think, he looked a little nervous. I think that, the throw that he had, it was nearly a pick six if it hadn't been a penalty, was a throw you probably don't want to make when you don't have a 40-point lead. So, obviously there's things to learn there. And I don't know how nervous I am about it, because I'm really not sure that the future at quarterback for North Carolina doesn't belong to somebody who's not there yet. And that's not to say Criswell can't get back.
Excuse me, everybody.
That's not to say that Criswell can't, dramatically improve and challenge and, do all that sort of thing. But I'm sort of thinking that, we got another good year from Sam Howell. Got a player sitting over on the bench who's prototypical quarterback, 6'5", 220 kind of guy, that can, make all the throws. I'm not sure that Criswell is ever going to be the starting quarterback at North Carolina. I'd heard good things about him, just anecdotally from different people. But, yeah, I'm not sure he's the future for North Carolina at quarterback. I'd like to see him improve and get better and have a good career, but I don't know how nervous all of that makes me.
Absolutely.
The tools are definitely there. I mean, I think you could see the tools are there. I mean, the strong arm. I mean, a couple of the throws he made, you went, oh yeah, he's got, comparable arm in terms of being able to make certain throws as to Howell. I mean, he can make the same throws Howell can, but he did look nervous. He looked like the game was moving 100 miles an hour for him, and that's okay. I mean, and the thing is, he'll be in position to compete to be the Carolina starter, and if he is the Carolina starter, I wouldn't be nervous about that in another year once he's had a little bit of time to get his feet wet and all that. Partly because if he does win the job in another year, presuming Howell leaves when we all expect him to,
that means he's pretty good.
That means he beat out a guy that's pretty good, and he's taken that step forward. And you've already seen that the tools are there to be a top-level Power 5 type guy to make all the throws. So there's no reason to be worried about that. And like you said, Tommy, I mean, this is always the thing when people say, that X team could beat this, such and such pro team or whatever. It's like, yeah, you know how many guys on Alabama are going to play in the NFL? Almost all their starters are going to play in the NFL. That's crazy. And a number of their backups will eventually play in the NFL. You know how many guys in the Cleveland Browns will play in the NFL?
All of them.
All of them.
Yep.
And many of them for significant lengthy careers in which they're getting better year after year. And, you get people like, well, but, as they get older, they get slower and all that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You ever wrestled your dad when you were a kid? There's a real difference. I mean, you could be a, 13, 14-year-old kid and you might be stronger than your old man at that point, but you still ain't winning. Because that old man knows how to fight dirty and knows where you're going to go before you go there. And when you try to go there, it ain't going to be there anymore. And that's the NFL. And that's college compared to high school. And that's the thing, when you see a guy like Criswell in his first action, and a guy that hasn't really had all the opportunities to catch up because of the weird off season and all of that, this is exactly what you expect. But what I'm looking for is tools. He's got the tools.
Yeah. And what people don't realize is how special a guy like Sam Howell is. I mean, I think people realize it. I don't think people realize it, though, in the same vein. I mean, it just doesn't happen like it happened last year for Howell. It happens once or twice across the country, and you think about how many quarterbacks are in that same position that it doesn't happen for. One thing, Buck, that I did like watching, I thought DJ Jones looked pretty good at running back when he came in, but I thought Elijah Green looked really good. And with Carter gone and Javonte likely, I mean, these guys are going to be the guys. And then maybe a freshman comes in and helps out. But I think the running back, somebody on the message board made the point that it's not that difficult to replace running backs in this type offense. I don't know if I 100% agree when we're talking about a guy like Javonte Williams and Michael Carter, but either way, Carolina looks pretty good down the road at that position, and it'll have to be because it's next year. It's not one more year of these guys. It's next year for Green and Jones and maybe Henderson. What'd you think there?
One thing to keep in mind as well, Tommy, is that those guys, Jones and Green, they weren't running behind the same offensive line that Javonte and Michael Carter were running behind. So, the depth on the offensive line at North Carolina is not great. They had already lost Ed Montelius. And, once they pull those other starters out and they're running behind, I don't know. I looked at the snap count article, and some guys played that I didn't even really know were on the team on the offensive line. No disrespect to them, but their names just didn't jump out the page for me. So, I think you put Jones and Green, even if it's just those two guys, behind what should be an improved offensive line next year, I think they'll be okay. And, they're not going to be Williams and Carter. That might as well make up your mind to that now, that you're not going to get the same production and same efficiency out of next year's starters at running back that you got out of Javonte and Carter, who were multiple year starters and have had strength and conditioning, had their feet under the training table, and had coaching from Robert Gillespie for several years. It's not going to be the same. But what they need to get, the goal should be, and what they'll hopefully will have, is a solid running attack. Something that can be complementary to the passing game, and something that keeps North Carolina from being one-dimensional. And they need to have that, and Jones and Green look promising that they'll be able to deliver that. And Kamara Edwards and Caleb Hood are coming in. I think I saw that Hood is like 6'1", 230, and runs a 4.4. Timed at one of the
legit camps.
I think it was the opening or something like that. So they need to hold on to the ball a little better, and But aside from that, I think they're going to have enough in the running game to complement what should be a really good passing attack with Howell in his third year. I'm not concerned about what they have coming back at wide receiver. I think they'll be fine. Emory Simmons has impressed the daylights out of me catching the ball. I think Don Callahan said maybe on one of your Saturday live shows at CHL, Tommy, that he's been very surprised and pleased at how well Simmons catches the ball because athletically he's a freak of nature. Fast, strong, had like one of the highest spark ratings coming out of high school. But Don was concerned at the high school level, does he have the hands, to be a number one receiver? And looks to me like he does. We'll see next year, I guess. But I think they'll be fine in the passing game and solid enough in the running game not to be turned into a one-dimensional offense, which is what you want to avoid.
Yep, and I think as long as something catastrophic doesn't happen, Carolina's offense is going to be good. But the defense is where the questions are, and rightfully so. And Jason, I thought it was pretty cool to look out there and see 5 freshmen or 4 freshmen across the front. Tons of guys get a lot of playing time. I thought Kamen Rucker flashed and showed some ability there. What'd you think about the defensive front and what they showed, especially when they were all out there together? There were no fallbacks. There was no Chaz or Gimmel behind them. They were out there together with Asante and Jackson and other guys playing linebacker. What'd you get off the tape from them?
So it's an interesting combination of things. You could see on the one hand exactly why those guys haven't been playing. And you could see it with them getting gashed here and there just because this guy, his hand placement was wrong, or, his pad level was a little too high, or, he was just not in the right gap the right way. A number of times, little things you could see, well, that's why that guy's not playing much. At the same point, you could also see flashes of, oh, wow, that guy's going to be a lot better than the guy in front of him. So it's one of those things where, again, if I'm looking at that as a coach, I'm going, man, can you just get it together? Can you just take the step? Because I'd love to have you out there because you're better than the other guy, at least potentially. But also, please just get it right.
Yeah, you can't take a wrong step and then get washed out of the play for a 25-yard run.
And in tight, on the interior with a lot of those things, I mean, you're talking about a foot makes a 70-yard difference. Mm-hmm. So, you better be really precise, and things happen so fast that you don't have time to be wrong and correct it. You have to be right. And so there were just a number of those little things, but you're right. I mean, Rucker, there's one play that in particular that stood out to me where you saw the run go to the right side when he was lined up on the left. And he probably ran 40 yards and tracked it down to make a tackle before the first down sticks. And you could see, like, man, that's why that guy's listed as a linebacker, but they're lining him up at defensive tackle. And you don't see guys run like that at that spot. He's a really interesting player in Bateman's system where they're going to be able to move him around a little bit. I mean, you can see at times where it's like, man, if he could just be a little bit, maybe 10 pounds heavier and a little stronger, you could really see him jump. But if he's able to do that while retaining some of the other attributes that he has, particularly his ability to explode and then be fluid and change a direction at that size, that guy's gonna be a problem.
Yeah.
And so
and he's got the mindset too, because he's nasty.
And you could see the effort level from a couple of these guys. They want to play. And that's one of the things you always look at is, does this guy love to play or does he love to be a player? And that's one of the things, especially in a game where you're up a bunch, you're playing in garbage time. I want to see the effort level. Are you out there trying to show that you can play? Or are you out there like, man, I'm finally able to play at North Carolina. Good, I'm out here. And, eventually I'll be out there, next year I'll be out there the first unit. Is that how you're doing it? You're happy to be here? Or are you busting your butt to show like, look, I belong out here and I'm going to be great. And you could see with a couple of those guys, the effort level is really high. Rucker definitely stands out there. And I also, by the way, want to call out one of my old players, Chris Holiday, who got a tackle late in the game, from Durham, Jordan, was definitely one of our best players when I was there, and a guy that I felt could be a Power 5 level player. It was just a matter of how he'd grow and all of that. And glad to see him out there at safety in the fourth quarter, and getting to see him come up and make a tackle for about a 1 yard gain. So, and that's a guy that, as he develops over time, I mean, he's a young freshman. I think he was actually a year younger than most of our seniors. That's the guy that, even though he's a walk-on, I'll be interested to see if he's able to find some time down the line. So just got to get him a call out.
Yep, he's got some good genes too, as well.
A little bit.
A little bit. Buck, last question before the break. What'd you see on the defense? I tell you what, Conley and Rucker and Grimes and Miles Murphy and all these guys, and plus whatever's coming in, and Pender.
Bingley Jones. Bingley Jones is the best guy they got.
Yeah, I mean, this defense could – there are issues right now, but this defense I don't think is going to be a worry either. That's why the future – games like this make me look beyond even next week in any bowl game and say, wow. Realistic Carolina fans think 2021, but what'd you think of the defense?
Well, the difference, I think, between the offense and the defense really, and what you saw, and I think just generally most people would say they liked what they saw from the defense better than what they saw from the offense in terms of the guys that were playing in the second half. The difference there is, well, it's a couple, but one of them is Bateman's been playing those guys all year. He's been playing Grimes. He's been playing Des Evans. He's been playing Miles Murphy. He's played Clyde Pender. Conley has been a starter, and so was Grimes, and so was Evans. And, those guys, this wasn't their first rodeo when they were in there in the second half. Now, some of the guys had not played quite as much, like, Kamen Rucker. He's played some still, but, you can see how, and 2021 for me is, it'll be interesting how they do. I think it'll be an improved defense, but you start thinking about, for me, down the road where you can pull a Notre Dame and just switch out 6 defensive starters on one play and have no drop-off, which is what they did against North Carolina at times. They just sub out, over half the team from one down to the next. And I think down the road, that's what you're going to be able to see. It looks like that's where they're building. I don't think they'll be there in 2021, but you start getting to 2022, I think you're going to see, the ability at least to substitute quality for quality and do it an awful lot. And when that happens, you can stay fresh. You can stop getting gashed and, coach players up on the sideline where you got guys just as good out there on the field playing. The future is looking very, very bright on that side of the ball. And I can't wait to see that point where you're going to see quality substituted for quality, in the first quarter of a game.
That's a
hockey
great
style line changes for the win, and all you have to do is look at Javonte and Carter for evidence of exactly how that can work, how much that can improve your team when you've got guys that can just platoon like that.
Yep, and that's what they're building for. Got to keep everybody together. Got to keep it rolling forward. mission accomplished against Western Carolina. We'll come back after the break. We'll talk about what's next. But first, Johnny T-shirt, JohnnyT-shirt.com.
Woo.
Yeah, this is a popular thing right here. This read is always great. Gets folks lively. Gets Jason off the dinner table. You get Johnny T-shirt and JohnnyT-shirt.com. Get all your Carolina gear, whatever you need for your family. It's Christmas time. Shopping. Call them up. Order things. Go online. Order things. Go see them in person. They need to see you. They need your business, and they need your support in these times. As we've seen, places on Franklin Street are struggling. Let's not make Johnny T-shirt one of them. Let's make sure they are booming by all of our Inside Carolina subscribers and listeners and everybody. Order one thing or multiple things from them for Christmas, for your family, for your friends, or for yourself. Do it. And, of course, if you're a premium subscriber, which at this point, how you're not, and if you're not, I don't know what to tell you. It's the best deal in the business. You get 10% extra off Johnny T-shirt. Let's take another short break. Let the national guys do what they do. We'll be right back with the Day After podcast. I'm Tommy Ashley. That's Buck Sanders, and that's Jason Staples.
Rest in peace, ye old waffle shop.
Indeed. We are back. I can't believe – so it's the Day After podcast. That's Buck, Jason, and I'm Tommy. Took the fam to the game yesterday. Beautiful Saturday in Kenan Stadium. I'll be honest with you. The ease of in and out during the 2020 season has been something quite enjoyable, but to not see all the fans in there for the seniors, especially, that was difficult. But, Jason, to your point, they were looking for somewhere to go while I was doing the Inside Carolina live show with Joey Powell and Chris Morris over at CHL, and I was like, go to the waffle shop. Never mind. And that hurt. That kind of hurt my soul a little bit. What a great place to pick up some breakfast and, throw it back and relive some memories. But anyway, and that's why, as I said before the break, we need to support Johnny T-shirt. So that does not happen to them. Buck, in your column, you reference this sentence, if I can find it right here. Going out on a pretty sturdy limb here, I think next weekend will be the biggest game of the year for North Carolina. I'll do you one better, Buck. I think it's the biggest game that North Carolina's played since the ACC championship game against Clemson. Tell me otherwise or agree with me.
Let me ask you a question first. Do you think this is a must-win for North Carolina?
I think it would be nice. I don't think it's a must-win in that it stops the progress. But
well,
I
that's
think
the first time I think I've ever talked to you. You didn't think a game was a must-win.
Well, I'm trying to diversify my viewpoints. I have some pretty locked in. When you get old,
you trying to be less predictable, are you, Tommy?
Less predictable. I will say this, unless there's somebody that can point me otherwise, I do think it's the biggest game since that championship game in 2015.
Well, I think it's big for several reasons. One is North Carolina has tried mightily to get a big win on a big stage a lot of times over the years. And more often than not, they haven't been able to pull it off. If this game ends up being the 7 or 8 o'clock game, I haven't seen if it's come out yet or not, exactly when they're playing. If you've seen anything, I can't imagine this not being like the 8 o'clock game on ESPN or whatever. Because is there a bigger national game this weekend that we know about?
Not unless Cincinnati and Coastal play.
Yeah. So, it's going to be a night game probably in Miami. Big national stage, maybe on even ABC or at least, maybe a feature game on ESPN. So, there'll be a lot of eyeballs on it, a lot of people watching. And, this is the kind of game that for North Carolina to take the next step, they need to learn how to win. They need to learn how to win these games. Now, sometimes the team you're playing is just better. That happens. But that there have been occasions where we have seen North Carolina go toe-to-toe with an opponent in a game like this for the entire game and then come up a day late and $1 short. So I think they need to finish. I think probably everything that I just said has been running through Mack Brown's mind since the Notre Dame game, or maybe even before that. That this is the kind of game that can turn around the perception of North Carolina, even of themselves. And so, I think from that standpoint, I think you're right. This is a very, very big game, and one that I won't call it a must-win. I rarely use that kind of language, but is certainly a very big game for North Carolina coming up next Saturday.
Jason, I mentioned earlier, this game was good for Carolina to get ready for Miami or to polish up for Miami. This game or Miami's game against Duke did the same for them. Pretty much similar game that they played with Duke. For the program, how important is this game against Miami? For the, not necessarily just to win, but what could come after the fact? And that's not guaranteed, even if they do win. But this is the games that Mack Brown, or this is a game that Mack Brown came back for.
Yeah, and it's interesting thinking about what the most important games have been in recent years, and I think it's interesting. It's one thing to look prospectively, right? If we're looking prospectively, this does seem to be right up there. I think if we look with hindsight, with the benefit of hindsight, that 2019 South Carolina game, I might mark as more important than this one. Just because winning that game allowed Mack Brown to stamp, I'm back. And I'm going to be a force when it comes to Carolina recruiting, when it comes to building this program. South Carolina, you were on the descent. Other teams in North Carolina understand that we are the brand. We are the flagship. And here we are, and take a look at what we're going to become. That game was really important. And if you think about it in terms of what bowl game they were able to go to and all of these things, it all traced back to that first win. So you could, in hindsight, I think this game is less important than that one was. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be a while before we see a game that's more important than that game. But it's a really important game. Because if you're looking at brands on the coastal side of the ACC, now I'm among those that's hoping that we're going to do away with those divisions, that the COVID, that one of the potential positives that has come out of the COVID season has been, man, it's kind of nice to play regional rivals a little more often, to play, an extra little bit where it's not divided up the way that things are in the Atlantic and coastal divisions. It'd be nice to go to a permanent rivals pod system. And if that's the case, then this may change a little bit. But in the current division structure, the only program that has comparable, and you can argue, I think, pretty easily better natural recruiting benefits, advantages. The only one that has better, or at least as good, of natural recruiting benefits in terms of brand and location and all sorts of other things in the Coastal Division compared to UNC is Miami. So if UNC wants to build into, and I know Mack Brown's vision here is for UNC to become the Clemson of the Coastal Division. If UNC wants to become that, then the rivals for UNC are not NC State and Duke and even Virginia Tech, Virginia. Those aren't your rivals. The team you got to beat to show that you're that program is Miami, because they're the ones that, with the Miami location, with the Miami brand, even though Miami hasn't won anything since 2001, really since they've entered the ACC, that brand is still Miami brand. The only program that has that brand that can compete and that has a location that's advantageous is Miami. So if you're gonna declare that we're gonna be the Clemson of the Coastal, if you're gonna take that step, you got to beat Miami every time, and you got to show that when there's. And the other thing is, you got to win your recruiting battles. It's nice to beat Virginia and Virginia Tech for recruits. You got to do that to build. But where you really want to get to is where you're beating Miami and Florida State and Clemson for recruits. And then eventually, on occasion, beating Alabama and LSU and Clemson and Ohio State for recruits. See, that's the progression. You beat Virginia and Virginia Tech and NC State for recruits to get to that level, and then you start beating those the real big boys, your Clemsons, Ohio States. And I would, again, in terms of recruiting cachet, Miami is generally recruiting against those teams. Now, they haven't done much with it, but if you're going to get those players, you have to prove to them that Carolina is not only the really cool Jordan brand, it's not only Michael Jordan's school. It's not only the school that has great basketball and that the brand and it's a top 5 brand in college sports. All of those, it's not only that, but this is a football brand. And you want to come here and wear Jordan brand football stuff. That's and that this isn't just a place that you can go to, it's kind of cool. No, this is a place where you can go to compete, to be a national program. And to do that, you beat Miami. That's the fastest path to that. You consistently beat Miami. And you beat Miami when it's an 8:00 game.
Indeed. On the national scale. We're recording this Sunday morning. I don't see a time. I've heard 3:30. I've heard 7:30. I think it'll be at some point.
Point is when it's a national game.
Yeah, it needs to be prime time, and Carolina needs to get it and get it done. The talk is over, and Buck, that's why I think it's such a huge game. Is I'm all for the talk and the talk about doing it. And 2020 is probably a year early than I thought that they would be doing this. We had this discussion all during the pandemic and the shutdown and all that stuff. But for that sense, Jason's made me think it's a must game. Does that make you feel better that I went my usual way? I couldn't avoid it. I tried to stay away from it. Seriously, but close out.
I don't think it took much pushing to get you there, Tommy, to be honest with you. I really don't know. I think Miami is kind of in its own world when it comes to recruiting. Miami, and it's, they recruit a couple of blocks from where the university is, basically, to get 5-star players. So, I don't know how often North Carolina will ever go head to head for a recruit against Miami. Miami does seldom comes north. Florida State used to quite a bit. They would come up into North Carolina and snag recruits all the time. But Miami they've never taken that path. There's so much talent, within a stone's throw of the campus that they don't really go there. So I don't know it's as important for, head to head against Miami as it is just developing the cachet that, yes, North Carolina is, a football school as well.
We're one of those dudes.
We're one of those dudes, as Jason just said. So from that perspective, yeah. And, it's funny. Everybody's been hoping for noon games this year because that's what Mack likes, and they seem to have done better in noon games. But last year they beat Miami in a night game.
This is probably one of the top 5 to 6 moments in Kenan Stadium when that play happened.
It was an unbelievable game. One of the best games I've been to in person, and I've been to some really good games.
Yeah. Got to get better at
that. I don't think that the fact that it's maybe a night game, it will be a deal breaker or, really hurt North Carolina's chances in that game because they've done it before against Miami and against a lot of the same players that are going to be there next weekend. They're going to have a few different players, though, and the one that makes me really nervous is De'Aaron King, because the other thing North Carolina has got to someday, somehow prove that they can get their hands on a quarterback that can run the ball really well, and he can run it really well. So
really well.
That's something that we're going to have to be talking about all week long. You look at his running stats this year. Some teams have done pretty well against him. Others not so much. And I think he had over 100 against NC State. And I think maybe, and to some extent, how well he runs the ball is dependent on how much he really needs to win the ball for them to win. If they don't need him to run the ball really well to win the game, he's probably not going to do so much of it. So, a lot of those things factor into it. There's a lot that North Carolina has to prove on several fronts, including being able to at least, limit the damage that King is going to be able to do on Saturday night will be a huge part of what everybody will be watching Saturday night.
Indeed, big game. Hopefully Saturday night, Miami and Carolina down there on a national scale. This has been the Day After podcast. That's Buck Sanders with his usual wisdom, Jason Staples with his usual expertise, and me just here saying random stuff. That
dulcet tones.
The molasses-like voice. I do want to take a second to give a shout out to all those seniors that Mack Brown honored on the field. Difficult time in 2020. They've been through a lot over the last 4 years, some 5 years, given what Carolina's football program has gone through. And to see a guy like Michael Carter have a good day, and to see a guy like Jace Ruder get a chance to play. My son's trying to get into Carolina. I said, that's the kid that you want to model. I don't want to ever hear somebody say they don't have time to do something. When you graduate from Keenan Flagler in 3 years, you play college football and you stay hurt and you have to deal with the rehab and you still keep it together and do all that. And, he said, well, I see him, live streaming on social media all the time too. And I says, and he's got time to do that and still get his work done. So shout out to Ruder and the rest of the seniors. Big deal to be able to graduate from Carolina and play for Mack Brown and all that good stuff. Buck and Jason, I do appreciate it. Thanks for joining me.
Appreciate it as always, Tommy, and always like to have renew my nodding acquaintance with Jason. He talks and I nod.
Absolutely. And he enjoys his meals. And he enjoys breakfast. Next time you'll hear from us, it will be, or from Jason and I, will be on the Game Plan podcast. It's a big one. We'll look forward to talking about it later in the week.